Hello, for this packet I have drawn out in a contour line drawing some everyday objects that we see. And what you need to do is put the shadows on it and shade it correctly so the light source has moved around the piece of paper. So you need to pay attention to where those things are. So we have some cans here and just a cylinder object, and then some, say, breakfast, what you would be having. And I've went through this packet here and I've done some, and it's not all the way completed, but just so you can understand where different parts will be going. So you'll want to have your normal shading supplies, so pencil sharpener, something to shade with, pencils, different erasers. If you have different types of shading pencils, that also works. So remember, when we are looking at an object, you have a light source. Think of this as we're standing here. This would be our feet and our shadows coming off this way. And whatever the shape is, it's like it's a mirror image but laying down. So here it's just a basically straight edge, so it's going to be here. But then as we get throughout the packet, there's other objects that the shadows will have different curves in and out, and you'll have to pay attention to those things and where the light is. Maybe objects are laying on top of each other and how the shadows would be working there. So this would be a great one to show of how it's super dark in this area, then it gets through our medium values on the value scale, and then it has its highlight right up to where the light source is coming. This one is not completed because it's just full of scribbles, and no matter how much they tried to move the pencil lead around, it was not working for them. So when you're shading, you really shouldn't even have to move it too much because you should have enough on your piece of paper, and the pressure that you're putting will make it dark to lighter values. And you're just doing this to get a nice blended. So no on this one. Then I did this one for you to see. So think of this carrying over. How is it going to be laying on an object, the handle? The little sugar packet, it would have a shadow there. And then why is there a space right here for this one? So the reason would be is because it's a spoon, and this is up in the air and not up against the countertop or the table that it's sitting on. Like this would be touching and this would be touching. So that's why there's a space right there. Then you have to think of little things. They're still going to have a shadow that would be in areas that you would have to put in some values. And if you're having problems with, when you're drawing on your own, seeing the gray values, you can always take a picture of something and go into your photo thing and change it into a black and white photo, and that would help you see something. So here we have just some everyday objects here, but notice how like this is casting its shadow onto here, and then what kind of shape is it going to have? Then how are these open? And this is going downwards and it's open, so this is not seeing the light. So that's why it's so dark here, but it's light right there. And then page 4 is, say, tubes of paint, and how do the shadows get casted on to the other art supplies here? And where is it the darkest at? This one, it's up on this one, so you'd have a little bit of a shading here. And then you could even do more up in this area. This would be dark, then dark again. So pay attention to where your little shading areas and light sources are. Here's another one. So this is like page 1, but notice that the light source has moved. So you'd have your light areas, your medium, and then really dark would be in all of this area. The light again, your medium, and then your really dark area in this, and then really dark, but then all this area up here would be the lighter section. Then this is the page 2 that we had, but it's light sources on this side now. And I'll go back here so you could just kind of see what it was looking like. So here was this one. And now notice how the shadow has moved to different places. Shadows were on this side, and now it's moved over this way. Then we have the same thing with this one, just the light sources on the other side. Same thing again, light sources on this side. And then you're going to set your shoe in front of you and draw it. So what I did was, just so you could see, is I took a picture of a shoe and turned it into something black and white so you could see the values. So I had a boot and I laid it down on its side. So you can see here when we're looking at it that it has lighter areas. And this was a black boot. So you can see it does have highlights on it. It still has some shadows. It's showing where it was worn and where the fabric has kind of been molded with that person's ankle, let's say. And then it gets darker down around here. And there's not a lot of a shadow, but it is a little bit in those fine areas. And then what I also did was this one, and it was standing, or like it normally would be with this part, but then I just tilted it over and did a different view so you could see more of what the inside of the boot would look like. And see how it still has some shadow right up against it. It's a smaller shadow just because when I took a picture, it was so close and the light shining from it was like mostly on that object. But I would still have highlights. So when I would shade this, I would take my eraser and pull those back out. So here is one I did of my tennis shoe. So you can see here that it does have such a small shadow because it had mostly the light above it, and that's why there's so many highlights on top. But the toe lifts up just because I've worn it so much. Newer shoes don't do that as much, but if you're looking at a shoe that's older and you've worn it a lot from your toes pressing down all the time, that's why you have your toe lifted up. But don't forget to do the shadow that would be showing. You probably would see a shadow in here too, and a little bit of a highlight touching on your area. So you go back in with your pencil and put them back in. Remember, shoestrings would be going up and over. If you have metal eyelets, they may have a shiny area, which would be the highlight of it. So pay attention to those areas. If you're doing your shoe and you're having a hard time, one thing would be is take a picture of it and turn it into something black and white like what I did here. And then what I don't want to see is something like this. Like, you can't even really tell it's a shoe, and this is not what we're trying to do. We're making things look realistic with our shading. So this is what it needs to look like. So continue working on your shading, improving your shading skills of doing your light values to your dark values, and make sure you always have your highlights. Happy shading!